Hi all. Can everyone confirm that they see the PowerPoint presentation on their screens?
Yes, we can see it.
Awesome.
Yeah, yes we do. We can see it.
Great. So we're going to introduce the presenters, starting with Melinda.
Good morning. This is Melinda Cox, and I administer the Core Services Program for the Division of Child Welfare.
Deborah Nelson, Division of Child Welfare, Associate Director over Operations.
Good morning. This is Les Gallagher, Financial Manager for the Division of Child Welfare.
Good morning, and this is Julie Crow, Director of the Office of Children, Youth, and Families.
All right, awesome. We're going to get started. Please remember to mute your phones, and also don't put us on hold. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone. This is Deborah Nelson. I just wanted to give you an overview of what we're hoping to do today. The first piece is going to talk about CORE, sort of the what is it, give it some definition to it, as well as discuss it in relation to some of the other efforts that are going on across Colorado in child welfare so folks can start making those connections. Then after that, we're going to review the current allocation model. And then from there, we'll just go briefly into the conversation about what we will do with the new funds that we were grateful to receive from the General Assembly this year. So for the purposes of talking about the program, we're going to turn it over to Melinda, so she'll walk us through the first couple of slides.
All right, thank you, Deborah. So for those of you that are not aware, the Core Services Program serves families that have the children who are at risk of out-of-home placement, and also they serve those children who have a least restrictive setting. So as you all know or may be aware, this definition is going to be changing with the rule change so that Core Services will be able to provide more families who don't necessarily meet that imminent risk of out-of-home placement, who just are at risk or have a need. So just keep that in mind as we go through our presentation today. So the outcomes of the Core Services Program are children that remain safely in the home. They have increased support to parents and families that are struggling to remain together safely, and that the county's departments they can expand their services within the existing operating framework through the county design programs. And what the county design programs really do is really kind of identify the unique gaps in your community, service gaps, that you can create your own unique county design service that meets the needs of your community. And so I'm always really offering the fact that you can make sure that your needs are met and the resources in your community, and by applying for a county design program. So the types of core services on page 3 are provided through an approved county plan as an alternative to out-of-home care, to reduce the level of placement needed or facilitate the child's move to a permanent family. The county also utilizes a lot of evidence-based services, but there was about $4 million, or there is about $4 million that's earmarked for evidence-based services uniquely to adolescents. But keep in mind, through that county design program model that I spoke about, there is a lot more evidence-based services throughout the state that are expanded not only to adolescents, but through children ages 0 to 21, actually. The types of core services include, on the right-hand side of page 3, home-based intervention, intensive family therapy, life skills, day treatment, sex abuse treatment, special economic assistance, which is up to $800 per family per year, mental health services, and substance abuse services. And keep in mind that Core Services is 100% therapeutic service delivery. Every county department can choose to either provide services through their qualified staff, through a salaried staff, for every service, including county design, with the exception of mental health and substance abuse. You cannot, as a county department, provide mental health services or substance abuse with your salaried staff. Counties also have the option to purchase of services through qualified resources and community-based organizations throughout your county and community for all the services listed. So on page 4, to give a little bit of a framework of what is happening with core services with the expansion of eligibility and the at-risk that we spoke about, the Core Services Program will provide prevention and intervention services. And there's a lot of work occurring in CORE that is linking directly to Program Area 3, or Flexible Funding for Families, which passed through House Bill 1196. And what Program Area 3 is going to do is it's going to allow counties to provide services outside of the child welfare system to prevent those families from ever needing child welfare services. So that would be a large portion of your prevention. When we say intervention or intervening from a family, what we're really speaking to is those cases that you want to close, that maybe is a program area 4, 5, or 6, and you want to close them because there's no safety or risk, and you're mitigating the safety and risk, but those issues aren't there, but the family still may need the services to continue. This will allow, the intervention will allow you to close that case as appropriate and continue the services utilizing the program area 3 mechanism through trails. So to give you some other options to program area 3, we'll also be introducing safe care, nurse-family partnerships, community-based child abuse prevention services through the Office of Early Childhood. You can also use child welfare services allocation and the 4E waiver allocations or interventions. So what we really want to think about, especially with the 6.1 additional monies in core, is that you are welcome to use those core services to expand your service base to prevent those families from ever needing child welfare. But the other thing you're able to do is use any funding source flexibly to prevent those families. It's not just core services. It's your child welfare allocation. It's the 4E waiver. But do keep in mind that whatever funding source that you use, you have to follow the rules of the funding source. So, for example, with core services, you're not going to be buying any cars. You're not going to buy birth certificates, right? You'd be using another funding source for those types of interventions. So with that in mind, and again, I don't know if we spoke about this, we'll have time for question and answers at the very end. We just wanted to provide you with a very brief foundation of core services program before we speak about the core services allocation model. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Deborah.
Okay, so for the next couple of slides, we'll be reviewing what we had in place here for fiscal year 13, just letting everyone review what those variables are, what the weights look like and such. And then we'll move on to discussions for next year and where we want to head as a community. So in terms of the current core allocation model, funds are allocated based on these 5 variables that are connected to caseload. So for you folks that were on the phone on Tuesday and you were asking about, well, what about our referrals and assessments and whatnot, that's no longer in the proposed model on child welfare allocation services. But that is in the current model for core. And so as you can see here, we have a 200% of poverty as well as referrals, assessments, involvements, and out-of-home involvements. It's out-of-home placements, isn't it?
Out-of-home placements.
Out-of-home placements. In addition to that, the 9% of the appropriation is allocated to evidence-based services for adolescents. As Melinda mentioned, this is a specific earmark in the long bill that allowed us to target the adolescent population, and we've also been building on that as a child welfare community to do more for those kiddos before they get emancipated or before they move and leave our child welfare system. Along with that, we have 43% of the appropriation allocated to 4 specific activities. These are all 100% activities where no local share is required. So unlike caseload where there's an 80-20 split, these are all 100%. This is the area that will very much connect to the new dollars. The $6.1 million was requested at 100%, and so the $6.1 million will be connected to these 4 activities in our proposal. So instead of being 43% of the appropriation, you are now looking at something closer to 49-50% of the appropriation being allocated to these 4 activities. So the 4 activities are behavioral health, substance abuse, 100%, which is not exactly the most informative of labels, I appreciate that, and special economic assistance. So my understanding of the 100%, and Melinda will kick me if I'm incorrect here, but this goes back to some of the history of this funding stream and where we were before we moved into the allocation model, as well as sort of the grant base and when there was federal funding and those sorts of pieces. And so it's just a continuity and a link to our history. And for me, that's why we've been keeping it. We didn't want to lose that tether. Melinda wants to jump in and just provide a little bit more description.
So with behavioral health, we want to make sure that there's always a certain amount of money that is earmarked or set aside for behavioral health or mental health. And then for your substance abuse, we want to make sure that there's at least $2.5 million in that line set aside throughout the state, because that is uniquely matched for the additional family services out of the Office of Behavioral Health. So it's an opportunity to match those dollars and double those dollars if you contract through your managed service organizations with those substance abuse dollars. The 100% really is very flexible in that the menu of services and your county design can be funded by that 100%. There's no ties or any kind of restrictions on that 100%. And then, of course, special economic assistance is the, we want to make sure that there's very little in special economic assistance each and every year, because we do not want it to look like it's TANF or basic cash assistance. So we really need to make sure that we monitor special economic assistance on an annual basis and make sure it does not go over $800 per year per family.
Okay. So you'll just see down here, and again this is to help folks make linkages, that behavioral health and substance abuse activities are linked to that regional model, and this is where we get to that in-kind match and wanting to have the bang for the buck for folks. And so the next slide is just an overview for folks of what the regions look like. And this shouldn't be surprising to anyone. There are no changes here. This is just communicating it in the same spot so that everyone can see us linking all of the dots. And then moving on to the next slide. So other components that we wanted to mention that are in the current model is that there's a 10% floor for the 10 large counties and a 15% floor for balance of state. We also have the rural frontier factor for the balance of state, the $25,000 minimum allocation. Again, we have the evidence-based services for adolescents at 9% of the appropriation. And then we have a couple of carve-outs. We have $150 that's held out for the core services evaluation, as well as $50,000 held out for tribes. In terms of core services in the long bill, for anyone that wants to look it up, it's Senate Bill 230 this year. Wanted to highlight for folks that it's not identified in the long bill as core services. Again, this goes to some of the history for this program area that is called Family and Children's Programs. Wanting to highlight what the appropriation looked like for fiscal year 13. The new monies that we received here for fiscal year 14, the provider rate increase goes to your 80-20. The $6.1 million goes to your 100% funds. And then the total available funds for fiscal year 13-14 are, and this number of the 51.5, we're going to clean that up. I think it would be better for folks to have it match the long bill, so I'll make that correction following this. So the long bill has a 51.8 if my memory serves, and so we'll get that cleaned up for folks. So then we get to move into what we're looking to do for next year. Given the time of year that it is and wanting folks to be able to be prepared for next year, the initial thought was to say, let's see what the model would look like based on the $44.5 million. So what we did for step one was we populated the model with the new data for your referrals, assessments, involvements, and out-of-home placements. And so we looked at the allocation just based on the 44.5. The next step was for us to apply the provider rate increase, which is a 2%. This goes again to the caseload, so it goes to your 80-20 portion of your allocation. And then the third step was for us to look at the 6.1. And what we opted to do here, just for the purpose of getting it allocated out, was to look at it proportionally. And so we looked at it across all of the 100% categories. What we didn't want to do is target a specific category where you have discretion across your 100%. And if you decided to invest heavily in behavioral health, then you didn't receive anything because we only looked at the 100% line. So for the way for us to be the most inclusive to support the work you have going on in your communities, we looked at all the lines. So what that means in terms of a ratio for the 10 large counties to balance the state is that there's a 3-to-2. Approximately of the $19 million that go to your 100% activities in the current appropriation, 66% for the 10 large counties, 33% of such for the balance of state, and wanting to maintain that. So we've maintained that proportionality. It's the 60-40 balance there. The issue being that if you go back to that piece, about the 43% of the allocation is for your 100% category. Now that it's moved up to 49%, it will change the overall balance of your caseload activities to your 100% activities. So instead of the allocation coming out at 73%, 27%, it is now coming out at 72%, 28%. So that's the overview. In terms of next steps for us, what we would like to do is we'll be distributing a number of materials for the purposes of the Child Welfare Allocation Committee conversation on May 17th. That will include a model of this proposal for consideration by counties so that you can study it. Just as we did with the Child Welfare Services allocation, we want to send it to you as an Excel document so that you can study it, you can look at the formulas yourself. Of course, if you're seeing anything in there that you think we've made a data error, please let us know. We're happy to get it corrected. But you can study it line by line and look at how these steps play out together. And then we'll also send it out as a PDF for anyone that doesn't want to tinker with the formulas and they're worried about printing it and it having 100 and some odd sheets print off on the printer. So we'll provide it to you both ways. And with that, I'd like to open it up for questions. If we could start with program questions. I know we have a couple of folks on the line that were new to CORE and very interested in prevention. And so let's start with just opening it up for the programmatic side, and then we can move into the fiscal side.
Sure. So Julie has just reminded me that we are kicking off a statewide summit, information summit, and there will be 4 regional summits the last week of June. Those 4 regional summits, we're going to be speaking to a lot of prevention and intervention. We're going to be focusing on safe care, nurse-family partnerships, community response, and of course, core services and PA3 and Program Area 3. We will be doing this in conjunction with the Office of Early Childhood and the Kemp's Prevention Center. So the 4 sites will be beginning in Durango, and then from Durango, from La Plata County, we'll be going up to Garfield County, and then from Garfield County, we'll be going to Pueblo County, and then on that Friday, the last Friday in June, we'll be going to Weld County. So there will be a save the date for that last week of June for those 4 regional kind of informational summits highlighting safe care, nurse-family partnerships, and community response in conjunction with core services. So we hope that you are able to attend one or more of those and have your community providers or anybody interested, your commissioners, any of your staff. We really welcome any of you to participate.
We'll probably get the flyer out.
And the flyer will be out either today or tomorrow. Thank you for the reminder.
Are there any questions?
Well, this is Dennis Story from Montezuma County, and my question is 50% carve out to the tribe. I do have a tribe in my region. Can somebody tell me what that is so I can be kind of aware of discussion as it might come up?
Sure, Dennis. So what we have done is we have carved out $25,000 of 100% for each of the 2 tribes in our state. So what they need to do is do what every other county does and apply through their core services plan allocation, through their allocation. And so that the core plan approval process comes once the core services allocation is distributed and that is known. And I've only had one tribe ever want to, it seems like during this time the tribes were really interested in wanting the $25,000, but then when it comes to the core plan and the approval process and all those sorts of things, there hasn't been a lot of follow through. The Southern Ute has been working with us for the last 5 years, and they are working closely with La Plata County to provide MST through Peaceful Spirit, because one of the requirements, as you know, with core services is that every dollar has to be in the Trails automated system, and so the tribes need to really work with communities and their counties to make sure that that happens.
That's because I'm calling on my personal phone because I have the speaker on my cell phone on. And
Hello.
Whoever's using their cell phone, if you could please put yourself on mute, that would be fantastic. And then Dennis, just to follow up, we're aware in terms of what we could do to be more supportive to the tribes and help them. We know that there are some infrastructure barriers to them being able to maximize the opportunity that the funds would allow. And so we're looking at that systemically as an agency, and I know that we've had leadership that have connected with you in terms of sort of what it looks like for you. But I see more of that coming out over the next few months, that we'll be looking at that to see what more we could do.
The other thing that Program Area 3 offers for everyone to keep in mind is that there will be a unique security profile for your community and your nonprofit organization, so that you can contract with those community-based organizations and nonprofit organizations to provide services through core funding. So they will have access to Program Area 3 only, and their unique security profile will allow that service delivery through Trails so that you can use core services. And that may help the 2 tribes that have been a little bit struggling on trying to get Trails access and Trails, be up on the Trails 101. So I think that's a great opportunity for your community-based organizations, but also for the 2 tribes. And like Deborah said, we're really trying to look at that systemically to make sure that we can maximize that funding opportunity for those 2 tribes.
So this is Dennis again, and I know that the Yukon tribe will be very interested in opportunities. Is this going to be up to me to reach out to them? Is the state going to reach out to them? How does this conversation begin?
We would be happy to reach out to them. So we will work with our liaison here so that she is fully integrated, because she really is looking at it across all of our offices, and we would be happy to connect with them on that issue, Dennis. I think it would be great for us to bring you into the loop just so that we have that and you are knowledgeable as to it, so that we have the left and right hand talking, but we're happy to do that.
And Dennis, this is Melinda, I'm always happy to walk through that core plan and that core plan process, especially if they've not done it before. Spending some time going down there and really kind of walking through that process, I have no problem doing it. I'm very happy to assist.
But once again, so I'm clear on this, you're going to reach out to them and include me in that process.
Yes, I'm happy to do that, Dennis. This is Deborah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
This is Ron Mitchell. So in the block model, there are rewards for outcomes such as permanency and availability of core services. Dollars are tied directly to such outcomes, or at least they're supposed to be. So I'm wondering, what analysis have you done to determine if there's an equity between counties, given that the evidence-based services is being held out as is regional funding? Because last year when we looked at that, it created a great deal of inequity between Colorado's children for having equal access to being prevented from being out of home or returned home. Can you tell us what you've done to look at that?
So the short answer is that we have looked at it from the standpoint of saying what we'd like to do, if we have your support, is work on it next year. What we don't want to do is a scramble. And what was happening for us is that it was sort of business as always, and then we were able to get our request through for the $6.1 million, and that caused the revisiting. And so we've had folks studying the formula here to say, what do we want to do? But for me, there's also an issue of how do we want it to align with the larger child welfare services allocation, and what do we want to do to acknowledge the evidence base. For me, the fact that we have approximately half of our activity going to evidence-based, but we very much focus on the earmark of the $9 million, is doing the 4 million, excuse me, 9%, 4 million. It's doing the program an injustice, because the evidence base going around the state is quite incredible, and there's some opportunity there for us to be doing some of the peer-to-peer through the practice model and whatnot. So we've looked at it from that angle, but in terms of wanting to tinker with anything for this year, to move anything, we have not undertaken that.
That concerns me, because this year you have that new funding that you could easily take and try to create some equity there. And I will point out that most of the practices, if you talk to counties, are now pretty evidence-based.
Mm-hmm.
So if one county, just because one county got funding for it many, many years ago,
Right.
Most of the other counties are putting out funding towards the same evidence-based programs. And when they take a cut, they cut evidence-based programs too.
Right. So, Ron, if you have some suggestions, I'm more than happy to take them and work on them for the next week so that we could come up with some suggestions for folks. So I think you have my email, and I'd be happy to work with you on that piece.
Yeah, I'll email you.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or feedback for us? We appreciate that this is just a proposal, so similar to Ron, if there's other feedback, we're happy to take it back.
This is Sorry. This is Jill Calvert from Mesa County.
Hi, Jill.
Hi. I was just looking at the breakdown, and you have 44% with involvement. And I'm wondering if that really supports our new model of trying to push steps forward. Because really, with Program Area 3 and the design, the program design, we really want everything to move to the front of the system. So we should see a drop in involvement. So I'm not sure this reflects that.
And I think that's completely a fair point. And if there's a way for us to do it intelligently and still get you an allocation for fiscal year 14 on a timetable that isn't going to cause stress, we can do that. And if not, I'm more than happy to have us look at it next year and work on it in a way so that you are prepared for making that shift. I completely agree in terms of where we want and the alignment, and one of our goals is to align our funding to our values. So I think we need to make that move. It's just a question of when.
The other point, Jill, to make, this is Melinda, is that Program Area 3 is completely optional. So that I appreciate that, Mesa County is fast forwarding, wanting to front load their prevention services, which I applaud and really support. There are some counties that may not be ready for that at the get-go. So I think that Program Area 3 does provide an opportunity for front-end services and prevention, and we will have all that information in trails and we'll be able to track it. I think it's going to be some time before we look at incentivizing that. We're going to have a couple years to really look at prevention and where it is and where it's not, to really kind of analyze how we can incentivize that prevention piece.
And for me, on that timetable there, when we think about safe care as well as the community-based child abuse prevention, we're talking about having sites grow, 3, 6, 9 or 6, 12, 18, and needing to allow that to be present and available in order to maintain some level of equity.
This is Phil Hanks from Chaffey County.
Hi, Phil.
I just wanted to know a little bit better as to the distribution of the $6.1 million of funds, and it looks like it's all going to go to 100%, but it also looks like there's going to be a way to determine if it goes to mental health, substance abuse, or 100%, and how does that decision get made, and especially if it's a regional for substance abuse and mental health, and then a county is in a region, but then they want funding just for themselves and not just for substance abuse, but for 100% dollars for other programs. How will that be distributed?
So, Phil, this is Melinda, and I'm going to try to answer as best possible. I really advocated for really doing it separately. So doing each line separately, because what happens through the core plan process is that counties can determine or apply for additional from their 100%. They can put additional 100% into their special economic assistance, or they can choose to put additional 100% in their substance abuse, or they can choose to put additional 100% in their mental health. And then with the regions haven't changed. So we didn't want to punish per se or not give the opportunity for additional funds in the regional allocations by not considering mental health and substance abuse. And we didn't want to look just at the 100% because some counties added a lot in their special economic assistance and some counties didn't put any in special economic assistance. So we thought the fairest way to do that is to really look uniquely in at those 4 separate lines and prorate that in a percentage-wise to back into that $6.1 million, so it gives an opportunity for every single line to increase. Does that make more sense?
Right.
And then Les, we're going to have to jump in.
Yeah, hi, Phil. Just to add on to what Melinda said, when you receive the model, you'll see a tab in there that clearly shows how that 6.1 was determined, how it was allocated out. And as Melinda pointed out earlier, each of those 4 components were identified and the funds were distributed by each component to get to a total. So you'll see the breakout when you see the model.
And for me, Phil, part of your question goes to whether or not we want to continue with regions and how is that going. I know I've received some feedback even on the collaborative management side about different issues that are going on. And so for me, there's 2 pieces to it. One part is the $6.1 million with wanting to say we really want to be able to put that where we want it and maybe we don't want it to be proportional. And then the second piece is more about the model that we had for fiscal year 13 to say, is this how we want to do it, or do we need to break it apart and do something different?
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? So this is Kendra Mulch. So the core component, has it been determined that they're equal in effect, efficacy?
They're not so much equal in that we proportional to everything that was existing. However, as Melinda was indicating, you may be a county department that moved everything out of your 100% to put it in your special economic assistance because that's where you wanted it to be. Or alternatively, you put everything into behavioral health. And so what we did is we looked at all 4 factors equally, but in terms of how the dollars play out, they're proportional to whatever your categorization was for fiscal year 13.
So it could be different county by county. If one county prioritized 100% or substance abuse or mental health, and we just followed the current way of prioritizing.
Exactly.
And proportionately, it's a very good point. If you added all of your 100%, so Kendra, if you added your 100%, your special economic assistance, your mental health, and your substance abuse, it would turn out the same way proportionally. So we just want to make sure that we did it separately to make sure it was equal and fair, and then we added it all together to make sure it kind of check our math. So regardless of how you determine at a county level what your priorities are, you're not being disadvantaged. We just wanted to make sure that it was fair and equitable.
Well, and I think the other thing that this model does is that we didn't attempt to change the philosophy of any given county. We simply just looked at your current philosophy and county by county allocated the dollars along with your current practice and philosophy. So to recognize and appreciate the culture of any individual county and what their current practices are.
So if you were the county that received the regional funding, how would that look? Is that pulled out and then funding is distributed proportionally, or is funding also, some of that $6.1 million would go towards increasing that regional line?
The latter is correct, Ron. We want to make sure that the regional counties had an opportunity to increase and enhance their service delivery in substance abuse and mental health. So that's why we did it each of those 4 components separately, and the regional allocations were left in for that 6.1 additional funds.
Does that get to your question, Ron?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
This is Brian from Adams County.
Hi, Brian.
Hi. I follow along that with the additional 100% funding, that there's a distribution that results in a shift between the balance of state counties and the 10 large counties.
Mm-hmm.
That seems very inconsistent with the earlier description of the factors that are used in order to distribute the funding to all overall. That is, essentially the definition of children in need through referrals, assessments, open involvements, and the like. The 7228 seems way out of line for aligning the allocation with the need. Can you address that?
So for me, the piece to that goes to how much do we want to have go to the 80-20, and how much do we want to have go to the 100%. And it was by definition, if we followed the parameters of the existing methodology, that had that play out in that manner. So for me, the piece about the caseload is we've heard a lot of feedback about that those numbers aren't necessarily the best indicator. So I didn't want to start tinkering with our variables. I wanted us to be able to do that collectively based on feedback from folks. So we might want to look at that in terms of saying we need caseload to be reflected differently here, and could doing that maybe create a shift? Possibly, right? There's also the piece about what do we want to have and how much do we want to have go to the 100% funded activities, and whether or not we need to make a transition there. But I also was looking at this in relation to the child welfare services allocation to say, does this allow for a balancing across allocations? And so that was another factor for me, Brian.
Okay, and I had intended to address something you touched on there as well, and that is distributing the proportion of the $6.1 million in funding across mental health, substance abuse, and the 100% line is likely not a practical thing. I know we have some opportunity at the county level to shift between those lines, but I know in my county that we're not going to have a proportionate increase in substance abuse and mental health service demand. We have more demand in what will be the 100% line, and probably very little in C. So I just want to make that observation sure how you can address that.
I think you're already flexible, but I'll let Melinda and or Les speak to that. We'll start with
So Brian, counties can address that. That's a very good point because we don't want to allocate funding where it's not going to be utilized, right? So through the core plan process, you can definitely transfer those 100% to 100%. So if you can transfer what we've increased in your substance abuse and or behavioral health over to your 100% and making it more flexible to address the menu of services. So you're welcome to do that through the core plan process. And as you know, I mean, the core plan is a living, breathing process throughout the year because your needs change throughout the year. So if counties want to do that throughout the year, not just at the core plan approval time, they're welcome to email me and I walk them through how to do that.
And will that be subjected to the 20% limitation?
No, not during the core plan approval process, but throughout the year, if you want to transfer over 20%, then we'll have to have that conversation to determine the rationale, and then we can go about maybe modifying your core plan at that point.
I'm sorry, Brian, what was that?
Thank you.
Okay. I do think your piece, though, in terms of your comment, is one that for folks that are under a region, you need to be thinking about that because that really is a piece about is that where you want to invest and then how does that play out for you at the regional level, because there is perhaps a little less flexibility when you are working with other counties where you've participated in that region. So if we put the money into a region but that's not where you think you need it, that might be something that merits an adjustment, and maybe that's an adjustment for differentiating 10 large from balance of state or about doing a differentiation between regions and regionless.
And the other thing I would offer to Deborah's comment is in those regions, this is a great opportunity to look at your increase with your substance abuse and your behavioral health and look at if the need is there. And if the need's not there, then within your region, determine what your priorities are and determine where you want to sustain those resources. So within your region, that's a conversation that you can definitely have, and that those numbers can change from substance abuse to mental health to substance abuse. Just make sure that you're being thoughtful to your providers and you're really providing a rationale to your shift.
So are you saying then that if your region, if there's an allocation from the 6.1 million, that it increases that with the regional allocation, and as a region we say, well, we don't need that much more, we can then decide as a region, we can take those extra funds and put it in the 100% line or the SBA or whatever, those other things?
Phil, what I would offer first as a region is if you believe as a region you don't need that money per se in substance abuse, but you need it in behavioral health, it's easy enough to make that switch. So let's consider that first. And then if your region really says, you know what, we really don't have the need in substance abuse and or mental health or behavioral health because our needs are being met with those contracts, then we can have a conversation within your region to determine what would be a fair and equitable way to redistribute those 100% to your own counties in the 100% flexible line.
So there is a mechanism for it.
Oh, hi, this is Renee, and I think that's really important because as we look forward to Medicaid expansion and the additional insurance enrollment of our families, the mental health and substance abuse is often covered through Medicaid services in the traditional sense. So I would suggest that we really seriously look at how do we get that 100% funding into the county line.
You know, Renee, that's a really good point, and I do think this is a unique opportunity with the $6.1 million. It's more money than we've ever received in an allocation that wasn't earmarked to anything. And I think it's a unique opportunity because with healthcare reform, more and more services that are covered by CORE will be covered by Medicaid. So then it will give the counties an opportunity to look at prevention or look at evidence-based services or look at other unique service delivery models that can fill the service needs in your community. So by way of, making sure that those funds are where they need to be as healthcare reform evolves.
And I also just want to say thanks to all of you who helped get this additional funding. It's been long overdue, and I'm very appreciative.
Well, thank you for that. It was certainly a heavy lift, and we're glad that it's helpful.
It's exciting.
We're also hoping that with Safe Care, Nurse Family Partnerships, and Community Response,
that brings an extra resource to counties and regions across Colorado where there may be some savings in other areas that you can use in other creative ways because you have those resources too.
And just to create that connection to the folks that participated on Tuesday, you'll remember that Jay was going over saying we have intervention dollars, we have safe care. Just a couple more that I wanted to highlight for folks is that we do have the mobility funds coming out. And so that really does help with some of your infrastructure support. We also are doing more to be able to provide resource to enable folks to make the practice changes. So we have the red team and assessment work that's just going to be embedded in the training, so that just makes it just that much more feasible for a county department to want to move some of their practices. And we have that occurring in numerous areas. So in terms of the big pictures, there's different ways for you to be able to plug in. So if maybe it's not over here in this allocation, but maybe it's over here in this opportunity. And we were very much in the design on our funding request trying to balance where do you want to have the control, where do you want to have county design like you do in Core, and where is it that you want to say, I need this to occur in our community, but it's something I want to connect to, whether that would be doing enhancements with Nurse Family Partnership or with Safe Care. And so there's some flexibility there that we'll be able to talk with you all more. Some of you may want to embed it straight in your county, but you're not limited to that being the option. There's a lot of flexibility in design here.
Deborah, I have a question around some of those new opportunities and understanding how that piece is going to work. This is Tony Rosansky.
Hi, Tony.
Hi. So we are lucky enough in our human services to have the health department co-located, and we have a very active nurse-family partnership here in Eagle County already. And so is the idea of the nurse-family partnership opportunity that we would add money to that program and then be able to expand it? Or is this going to be more of a look-alike program where families can be ordered to be a part of the program? Because in the nurse-family partnership program itself, it can never be court-ordered. It's always only voluntary.
Tony, this is Julie Crow, and it really wasn't meant to ever court order anyone into Nurse Family Partnerships. It was meant to provide dollars to enhance connections for counties that didn't have a strong connection with their Nurse Family Partnership program. So
Eagle sounds to be in a very good place, and it's where we would like to get some other counties to go in terms of the linkage. So the dollars that are going into Nurse Family Partnership are not a program expansion. They already have program expansion occurring within their existing tobacco settlement and all of their other dollars. So what we were wanting to do with Nurse Family Partnership is exactly what Julie said. It's a bridge building opportunity for us to be able to better utilize that resource and have that resource better utilize child welfare so that we're informing each other. And honestly, this might be an opportunity in terms of that design. You all probably would have some excellent expertise for how we can make it better across Colorado.
So the Safe Care program is meant to complement Nurse Family Partnerships, because Nurse Family Partnerships is for pregnant and postpartum women and first-time parents, where Safe Care is an in-home family preservation model that isn't so restrictive, so people can be second or third or fourth-time parents and have multiple children. And the other thing just to know is that the decision items for all of those are pretty enlightening, and you can kind of understand better the direction. I think those are posted on OSPD's website if you want to read actually how the decision item was constructed in terms of the funding.
And for those of you that were, oh, I'm sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, just to be clear then, so for the Nurse Family Partnership expansion for a county like Eagle, that would not be an appropriate request. It might be that we would step up to be technical assistance for others if working already.
Right. It really isn't an expansion. This one doesn't have an application process. The nurse-family partnership work is really more of a behind-the-scenes analysis to make systems better. It's not about service delivery for that component.
But just taking this to the next level then, so as we think about prevention, what nurse-family partnership offers our community could be a look-alike, not named nurse-family partnership, but the components of that success in cases where we needed it to be court-ordered, for example, or it wasn't the eligible first child and there was not safe care in the community. It could be something like that in our PA3 dollars, right?
Yep, absolutely correct. And we will be hiring a position here for safe care specifically that will work here at the state, but really be a conduit or a collaborator with Kemp, with your providers, and with the state, so that this person can facilitate really the rollout of safe care throughout the entire state. So those that position should be posted within a couple, I would say, within a couple weeks.
Thank you. And just so you know, there'll be a flyer coming out today or tomorrow where we'll be in 4 regions of the state offering information about what is safe care, what does this mean to enhance collaboration with nurse-family partnerships, how would you become a community response program, and then the committees will be constructing some sort of an application process for counties or groups of counties or regions to apply for the safe care and the community response programs. And so we'll have some information about how that can work, and we strategically kind of decided to go ahead and do that in 4 different places in the state.
And again, to follow up with Julie, those 4 places are June 25th will be La Plata County, June 26th will be Garfield County, June 27th will be Pueblo, and June 28th will be Weld County.
We're working also to make some sort of call-in or Skype or something for people that can't make it to those 4 locations.
And then in terms of the reference to the decision items and letting folks, you obviously can go up and take a look at those just to study the program, but wanting to connect that for folks on the finance sub-pack, because there was conversation about, you know, what does it look like for counties and outcomes and whatnot. And you'll remember that one of the handouts was provided the examples from the child welfare request from this past year. And so you can go up and read the content for that purpose as well. Are there any other questions?
This is Kim Watty from Keller County.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a couple of questions. And you were talking about the analysis between the child welfare allocation and the core allocation.
Mm-hmm.
And I would really like to see kind of how they relate, because I'm a county that got cut in both pretty severely.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems weird, because we're really trying to work on prevention, but we keep getting cut in both areas, and that's a concern. And I don't know what this next allocation will be with the increase, but that's just something doesn't seem to be working right in my county. I'm not sure what.
Okay.
And there's a few other counties that are doing this because we're overspending in each area.
Right.
And so it continues, like next year, the child welfare allocation is going to be cut again. And thank goodness for the floors, but we're still overspending and we're not able to get back to the right. I mean, we're trying to prevent, but we can't get there when we're getting cut. So I guess that was a concern. And was there a decision on how the 15% is going to be allocated back into, or not the increase is going to be allocated back into the core allocation? I know it's to the certain areas. Is it going to be the same amount for every county, or has that been decided?
It was completely proportional based on the agreements that were put in place last year. So it wasn't a matter of front-loading certain counties or creating any sort of bonus for certain counties, if you will, to tinker with the formula. We purposely did it as a tail on the end of the formula so that folks could see how the formula played out for the next year, and that we were able to allow everyone the benefit of the increase. So it was just straight across the board with the existing universe, if you will. In terms of, Kim, I'm more than happy to, when you get the materials tomorrow and you're looking over them, you'll want to compare, for example, what would it have looked like for the optimization model? What would it have looked like for, and what does it look like in the proposed incentive model? And then you'll pull up the core, and I'm more than happy to spend some time with you or have Les spend some time with you, and we can just walk through and make sure that we're on the same page with all of that.
That would be great, because it just seems strange from my, I mean, I'm not the north, not every county is experiencing that. It seems like there's a few of us that are having this issue.
Right.
Thanks.
Right. Are there any other questions?
So the slides and today, will those be posted on the department's website, or where will we find those slides?
Yes, we're going to work on that. We're going to try and get everything posted by tomorrow.
Thank you.
This is Brian again in Adams. Well, I just want to make an observation that I think if we progress along the path that's proposed, it's understandable as we view it today. But if we roll forward down a year from now, what we've done is set up an incredibly difficult transition into anything new. Because we're saying we're going to put the $6.1 million out in this proportionate way that makes sense today, because we're 6 weeks, 7 weeks from the new fiscal year and so forth. But to the extent that we're going to be reworking and revisiting, we've unfortunately set up a new basis from which the transition will be viewed a year down the road. I think we've got to go into this with our eyes open and say this is for a short period of time, and let the counties know that up front, because there's change coming.
Ryan, I think your point is right on, and it very much dovetails into Ron's point about if we were going to change the formula, this sort of would have been a prime opportunity to do it, because then you could use that 6.1 to sort of minimize any of the harms and whatnot. So for me, in appreciating the history that we had here on this formula, it really was for 1 year. And what do we want to do then? And so I think we need to make a decision. Is it that we do want to move away from that? That needs to be one of the decision items. And if it does, what does that mean? And then we can sort it from there in terms of expectations. Because if we are going to, move and study this for fiscal year 14 to move into something else for 15, a 1-year pot of bonus money has a very different use than this is my new base. And I appreciate that point very much.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Where will this be posted at tomorrow?
It's going to be posted on our CDHS website, and we're currently working with our communications team to have a designated CWAC website. I'm not sure on the timeline on that, but I will be able to communicate something to you guys tomorrow.
We'll have it up somewhere tomorrow on our website.
Along with that, we're happy to distribute it with our other distribution for QUAC so that it can get out to counties, so that if anybody wants to have a copy, they're more than happy to have it there, so we can distribute it a couple of different ways. Like I said, I do want to...
It might also be good to send it out to everyone who participated, and we can get it out, and also to Jennifer Pelosi through CHSDA.
We'll get that done.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no further questions, we thank you all for joining us today. I think it's an exciting time for Colorado with some new dollars coming in, and we're glad that you're all at the table with us.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think back in Vegas, man. Yeah. It's like. Oh, that was just
yes, we are hung up. We are hung up. At least 50. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ron raised his question that he posed to me at the last CWAC meeting.